The concepts brought up in the game HSR could potentially open a doorway to the spiritual world or the astral plane or whatever name that you have put on it. But what we know as Christians is that crossing over into this other realm of existence can manifest itself in the real world. Welcome to the channel. As always, I am your host, your boy, your big unk, Max Vapor. For this video, we are going to try and tackle a few of the concepts that are brought up in Honkai Star Rail and how these ideas can potentially lead someone into paganism as well as occult and esoteric knowledge that some may say is a gnosis or follows the Gnostic belief and is the true form of Christianity, but I disagree because I believe that these practices will eventually lead a person down the dark road of demonic oppression, if not full-on possession, if one is not careful. The concepts brought up in the game HSR could potentially open a doorway to the spiritual world or the astral plane or whatever name that you have put on it. But what we know as Christians is that crossing over into this other realm of existence can manifest itself in the real world. For those of you who are unaware, HSR is a turn-based gacha game. I am someone who loves RPGs, and I actually used to skip school in order to play Final Fantasy VII when it first came out. Believe it or not, I actually quit playing Marvel Strike Force in order to play HSR. And Marvel Strike Force is basically the Marvel take on the turn-based RPG gacha game genre. So with any and all gacha games, they are going to be free. And with that, they got to make money somehow, some way. And thanks to Hoyoverse, the tried and true tangential tangent towards total technology that towers turbulently is tokens. Or, in other words, in-game currency that you buy with real money, which then allows you to gamble on roles for characters. As we Christians know, the Bible states that gambling is bad, okay?
I'm here to tell you about drugs and alcohol and why they're bad, okay?
Going galore on gacha gaming gave me gallons of gag. I don't know. Oh, wait a minute. Do I have to say pause? I don't know. I mean, that sounded kind of sus, as the youth likes to say.
How do you do, fellow kids?
Let's just say that HSR provided a much better gameplay loop, plus the characters were new and interesting. HSR is another Hoyoverse creation and plays into their idea of different realities being linked through a world tree-like analog, where similar and sometimes the same characters are shared between Honkai Star Rail and the game that came out before HSR, which is Honkai Impact 3rd. Two of the characters that played a huge role in Honkai Impact 3rd, you end up meeting them basically in what is the first stage of HSR, which is known as the Herta space station. And those two characters would be Himiko and Welt. Just for a quick backstory, Himiko was a beloved character in Honkai Impact 3rd, and spoiler alert, but she died a heroic death, whereas Welt basically somehow ended up leaving that world of Honkai Impact 3rd and somehow jumped into the universe of Honkai Star Rail. Just as a quick aside, you cannot tell me that either Himiko or Welt was not your favorite character at the beginning of the game.
I must leave now.
What happened?
Must see the end of your story.
Who is that?
Reach the end of this story.
Mr. Yang, is she?
Especially after Welt came through like a straight G and fixing the glasses all anime style. And by the way, let me just say this and get it out the way. Kafka does not count. She will always and forever be mommy number 1, with Himiko, of course, being mommy number 2. Honestly, I'm hoping at some point the writers and developers over at Hoyo at some point share more of the backstory and the lore that went on between Himiko and Kafka, because they obviously knew each other somehow, some way, especially when you notice how Himiko was acting on that scene where Kafka comes basically as a projection into the Astral Express. So let me say this. The beginning of HSR is awesome. It's a great hook, and it gets people playing and, more importantly, gambling. But other than that, the Herta Space Station section of HSR is perfect. 10 out of 10, no notes. So, after the HSR main character or player insert, but after Stella joins the Astral Express, you then travel to the next planet, which is named Belobog. We meet two crossovers from Honkai Impact 3rd, which would be Seele and Bronya. Further on in the video, I will go into more detail about Belobog. But first, this idea of different realities being linked through a world tree is pulled from pagan Norse myth with their world tree, which is named Yggdrasil. The Yggdrasil world tree linked the different realms like Asgard, which we know as the home of the gods, and of course, the world that we all know, Midgard, which would be the home of the humans. And again, that ties back to Marvel, as we all know, with the MCU and Loki and all of that. Not only that, but the irony is not lost on me that Final Fantasy VII also had their major city named Midgard. Coinky-dink? I think not. So, why is it that we see these same motifs repeated over and over again in entertainment properties and in mythology from different cultures? Because the idea of a world tree also appears in the Kabbalah. When it comes to the pagan Norse mythology, which we Christians already know is nothing more than the fallen angels and the Nephilim giants seeking worship from humans. For those of you who are unaware, the Kabbalah is a form of Jewish mysticism. So I find it interesting that the idea of a world tree would pop up there as well. I can't help but wonder, why is that?
For those who don't know what the Kabbalah even is, in short, it's Jewish mysticism. It is a part of the branches of occult knowledge. In fact, the Kabbalah is what the Scottish Rite Masons practice. Albert Pike, a prominent Scottish Rite Freemason leader, admitted this in his book Morals and Dogma, that Freemasonry was connected to the Kabbalah. In his book, he said this: all truly dogmatic religions have issued from the Kabbalah and returned to it. Everything scientific and grand in the religious dreams of all the Illuminati and others is borrowed from the Kabbalah. All the Masonic associations owe it their secrets and symbols. So this prominent Freemason leader, whom Donald Trump just ordered to have his statue fixed after it was destroyed, admitted that the Kabbalah was the father of all secret societies, meaning that the Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, directly birthed Freemasonry and all the other elite secret societies. Isn't that quite interesting?
The one thing I do know is that these secret teachings that are reported to be locked away in the mystic Kabbalah and its teachings will without a doubt lead Christians away from the Most High and Jesus Christ. The idea of a world tree is central to the tenets of Kabbalah, which passes down secret knowledge that ultimately leads to a path of self-worship, self-idolization, and ultimately away from God. The Kabbalah seeks to give its practitioners the deeper meanings and hidden knowledge in order to transcend, when in actuality you will only open yourself up to possession by powerful spiritual beings and fallen angels, because there is nothing hidden that the Lord has not already shown us in His Word. And to be caught up in these teachings of seeking hidden knowledge, like the Gnostic sect, will ultimately lead you away from the Most High and down the path towards performing rituals and magic, which, as we know, is forbidden. Now, before I continue on with the video, I want to make this one disclaimer and make it crystal clear so that people understand. Because some may think or try to suggest that my words on the topic of the Kabbalah are anti-Semitic, and it is not. I have nothing against or no ill will towards the people who follow the Jewish religion. What I'm trying to shine a spotlight on is that the Kabbalah itself and its teachings should not be followed by people who follow the Messiah, Jesus Christ, or his name in the Hebrew, Yeshua HaMashiach. Because Yeshua teaches us not to hate, to forgive others, and to turn the other cheek. So, as one of his followers and as a member of the body of Christ, it is not in my heart to hate another human being. A human being that is made in the Creator's image. So now let us dive just a bit deeper into what the Kabbalah is in relation to HSR and how concepts from the Kabbalah are used to populate the game world. As I stated earlier, the first planet that we go to in-game has a relationship to the world tree that is spoken of in the Kabbalah through the deity that the people living on that planet worship or follow. And of course, the planet being Belobog and the deity or protector of that planet that the people there follow, his name is Klepoth. First, let's break down the origin of Belobog and then circle back around so we can then tackle the trickier topic of Klepoth. The town of Belobog in the game functions as the first actual planet or adventure that the player goes on after creating their character, obviously disregarding the exploration of the Herta space station and the boss fight with the Doomsday Beast. The name of the planet is significant because Belobog is a reference to a Slavic god or deity that represents light, goodness, and happiness. Belobog is often portrayed as the counterpart to the deity known as Chernobog. Belobog and Chernobog are a pair of Slavic deities that are believed to have first appeared in Helmud's Chronicle. Also, as a quick side note, the entity Chernobog also appears in other entertainment properties such as Neil Gaiman's American Gods, as well as appearing in video games like Persona 3 as one of the summons. Not only that, but it has made an appearance in multiple Disney properties, namely the Kingdom Hearts video game and the classic animated movie from 1940s titled Fantasia with Mickey Mouse, which is a movie that I actually loved as a child and watched back to back growing up. But back to Helmud's Chronicle. Helmund. It's a weird little German name, isn't it? You know what? Nope, I'm not even gonna. Okay. So there is Helmud's Chronicle, which is also known as the Chronica Sclavorum. That's a interesting word now, ain't it? Or also known as the Chronicle of the Slavs, which details the pre-Christian culture and religion of the northwestern Slavic tribes, which is a location that we now know as Eastern Germany. So I say all of that just so that we have a clear understanding that the real world entity of Belobog and Chernobog are in reality nothing more than what we Christians would call demons or fallen angels or Nephilim or disembodied spirits. There's, a ton of different names, but we know what they are. And these creatures are not to be messed with. Or that is what I would be saying if scholars weren't basically all in agreement that these entities might not even exist in the way that we thought. While Chernobog does appear in the chronicles, Belobog does not. It's only in later, mostly unreliable sources that the name Belobog appears. Plus, it's not entirely clear if Chernobog was considered to be a deity and was actually worshipped by the Slavic people and is instead a pseudo-deity that may have meant something along the lines of bad fate, in kind of the same way that we nowadays might say that someone has, say, 7 years of bad luck after breaking a mirror. Honestly, I don't even know if people who still say that. My unk status might be showing. But basically, Chernobog is a representation of bad luck and not actually a deity that people worshipped. Although, I think that brings up an interesting question. If we, as humans, take an abstract concept and warp it and transform it into an idea that there is an entity out there in the spirit realm that is then given the name of said concept, and then further down the line, we humans, in our ignorance, begin to worship it. Have we just created a deity out of thin air that now accepts human worship and thus is given shape and form because of it? Or would a spirit entity fill in the blanks of this idea or concept and, in a sense, step into the shoes of Chernobog and or Belobog and just simply take on that name in order to receive the praise and worship from humans? I don't necessarily have the answer, but nonetheless, it is an interesting thought experiment.
In a gacha game called Honkai Star Rail. Girl, don't. I know. No one takes gacha games lore seriously, since they are often seen as gambling simulators with hot anime girls and guys to distract us from that fact. And gachas are also considered greedy video games' final boss. And though I agree with parts of these sentiments, I also believe that there is way more to this game and its lore than you might first understand. Sure, on the surface, there is a huge cast of characters with cool abilities, big assets, and sometimes tragic backstories, but they all distract us from the very core of Honkai Star Rail's story. A grand tale of a cosmic chessboard whose pieces are moved by incomprehensible beings that can destroy or rebuild the universe if they so choose. The eons, the embodiments of cosmic horror. These entities are far more frightening than what the surface level of this game lets us see, but the horror of realizing just how small we are when we look up at them cannot be dismissed.
Now, let us turn back to Honkai Star Rail and the planet Belobog, because on that planet is where the protagonist, whether it's Kalis or Stella, in game they are basically called the Trailblazer. And this Trailblazer is almost killed during a boss fight cutscene, but because they have main character syndrome and plot armor out the wazoo, they are instead given a new weapon, a new power-up, and also they end up attracting the gaze of the entity known as Qlipoth. Now, this is a topic that we can actually sink our teeth into and hope that we don't bite off more than we can chew, because now we have to try and digest the Kabbalah in order to get at the core of what exactly is Qlipoth when it comes to the occult and esoteric knowledge that is hidden just beneath the surface. So, let's go ahead and dive into the deep end of HSR lore, and pray I don't muddy the water by first quenching your thirst for knowledge with a discussion about the aeons. In HSR, Qlipoth is an entity that is known as an aeon. The lore behind the aeons in Honkai Star Rail is drawn from several different sources, such as H.P. Lovecraft's Great Old Ones, and he was a great old racist. And if you don't believe me, here's proof. As you can see here from Sonia H. Davis's memoir, it states, he admired Hitler and read Mein Kampf almost as soon as it was released and translated into English. I believe he was much influenced by that book. It may have had much to do in influencing further his hate, not only for Jews, but for all minorities, which he made little effort to conceal. And adding on to that, even if you need more evidence, we have the science fiction writer L. Sprague de Camp. I'm pretty sure I just massacred that pronunciation, but de Camp wrote a biographical essay on H.P. Lovecraft, which was titled Eldritch Yankee Gentleman, which was published in 1971. It was here that the poem, with this atrocious title of On the Creation of... Yes, that's with the hard R. This poem appears in that biographical essay and is attributed to H.P. Lovecraft. This poem was first publicly published as irrefutable evidence of Lovecraft's racism. Now, some people might try to grasp for that old argument and question whether or not modern society should try and separate the art from the artist in some form of an attempt to try and still enjoy the works created by people with less than savory things hidden away in their personal history. Take, for example, R. Kelly. Can we still enjoy his music despite the things that he did? Me personally, in my humble opinion, I say to hell with that. Sometimes there could be extenuating circumstances or people being a product of their time and their environment and simply expressing the sentiments that were deemed acceptable at that time. But again, this is my opinion. I just feel like there is a right and there is a wrong. And deep down in our core, we know which is which. I am talking about the right and wrong based on a biblical standard and not the ever-shifting moral standard that society would have you go by, because it changes basically every decade. Now, back to HSR and the Aeons. The Aeons' inspiration also comes from Greek mythology, specifically the Titans. The inspiration also stems from Hinduism and the philosophical concepts such as Hegel's absolute spirit. If we turn to the actual in-game lore, it describes the Aeons as giant beings with godlike power that are the personification of the in-game paths, like remembrance, harmony, destruction, or nihility, just to name a few. Now, when it comes to the planet Belobog, the inhabitants basically worship or follow the path of preservation. And the Aeon of preservation is Qliphoth. However, the term Qliphoth comes from the study of the Kabbalah. As I said before, the Kabbalah is a form of Jewish mysticism and a tradition that seeks to understand the essence of God, the creation of the universe, and humanity's relationship with the divine.
The whole truth, and nothing but the truth, is Jesus Christ. But what led me to Jesus was first discovering the opposite of Jesus, a dark religion that has been covertly consuming the entire world since the beginning of time. It's cleverly disguised itself in many forms and has hijacked almost everything good on earth. I discovered that the opposite of this dark religion is Jesus. And what exactly is the opposite of Jesus? It's called Kabbalah.
In the Kabbalistic tradition, the Qliphoth or Qliphoth is seen as the spiritual shell or husk that concealed or conceals divine light. The Qliphoth represents impurity, evil, and obstacles to spiritual growth. The shells are seen as parasites that imprison the sparks of the divine energy. The clip-off are basically the evil forces that block the Sephiroth or Sephiroth. And yup, if you're thinking what I'm thinking, then yes, it is that Sephiroth. And again, Final Fantasy VII makes its triumphant return once again in this video. But that's where Final Fantasy pulled the name from. Basically, the Sephiroth are seen as the 10 divine emanations or attributes that God uses to interact with the world. The Sephiroth forms a path or diagram that is known as the Tree of Life. So the clip-off basically blocks these 10 divine pathways and basically corrupts the pathways and leads to a false spiritual practice and keeps the person from reaching true divine ascension. So now, with all that groundwork laid, I have a question for you. Why in the world would Hoyo decide to choose that evil pathway as the name for one of the aeons and make it basically the second aeon to turn its gaze to the player, with the first aeon to gaze at, the Trailblazer, being the destruction? In the cutscene, the Trailblazer is stabbed in the torso by Cocolia and is about to fall to his or her death. That is, if she wasn't killed outright by being stabbed through the torso with basically a giant ice spear. I don't know, maybe the Trailblazer is actually killed in that moment, and everything else the player experiences is sort of like the Trailblazer living out an alternate reality that in actuality is only taking place in the Trailblazer's mind, and it's experienced as the moment right before, his or her death and before brain function fully ceases. So all of the adventures are nothing more than years and years and however long, but it's basically all of that time is basically like an alternate life that's flashing before her eyes and playing out in just those few minutes or seconds before the lights fully go out. And everything that we see as the player is nothing more than clip-off blocking her divine light and her true spiritual pathway. The clip-off could be basically like blocking or concealing her true reality. And that would be her basically being dead or just about to die. And, with the clip-off blocking or concealing her true reality, it kind of could be seen as, the clip-off corrupting or distorting her ascent to her true divine path, which would basically be her ascent into the afterlife, I guess. I don't know. Okay, well, I guess that's enough of my poor excuse for a conspiracy theory. Anyway, I guess you could call that my version of a game theory.
But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory.
Anywho, disregarding my worthless game theory, I believe that the question posed earlier still stands. Why would Hoyo choose to name the Aeon of Preservation? Well, there is the obvious answer that since Kopov is the Aeon of Preservation, which the in-game lore describes the path of preservation as blocking or protecting or building a wall around objects in order to protect, which can also be seen in gameplay since all three, or I guess now all four of the game's preservation units are designed to protect their teammates in some form or fashion. This concept lines up with the description of the Qliphoth blocking the pathways of divine light. But to me, that seems like a bit of a stretch, since it only takes into account a very small portion of what it is that the Qliphoth stands for. The literal definition of Qliphoth is shell, husk, or peel. As a side note, I'm not really sure where the peel part comes from, but okay. Let's just roll with it. It is what it is at this point. So, as I stated earlier, the Qliphoth nature is to conceal or distort the divine light, which again matches up with the Path of Preservation gameplay and in-game lore, since characters that follow this path could be said are basically concealing their teammates' health. Not only that, but another thing that lines up with the in-game portrayal of Qliphoth and the Path of Preservation is the lowest realm of the Qliphoth embodies materialism, disharmony, and spiritual inertia, trapping the soul in the mundane world, which can be said to basically match up with the state that the Trailblazer initially finds on the planet Belobog. Plus, according to the Zohar, the Qliphoth were formed when the divine light was dimmed to create the material world, and they came to represent darkness and separation from the divine, which again sort of lines up with how Belobog is seen when the Trailblazer first arrives to the planet and begins to explore the world and uncover its secrets. The world is isolated from the rest of the universe. It's a planet that is covered in snow and is slowly dying due to its leader and the effects of the Stellaron. HSR creatively reinterprets the Kabbalistic concept of Qliphoth to shape its aeon of preservation. Qliphoth's motivations are a perversion of the idea of shells and preservation, resulting in a cold, indifferent, and isolating force. So again, some people may think that it lines up perfectly. Me, however, I think there might be a bit more to the story that we have yet to uncover. But that will have to wait for another video. So, in conclusion, we draw to a close. Because when you look at the concepts and the in-game lore about the people and planets and deities of HSR, and even Genshin Impact or Zenless Zone Zero, the developers and writers seem to take a lot of inspiration from, obviously, the real world religions and mythology that we have. Is it just a simple form of thinking that, hey, this is neat or cool or interesting, so we want to adapt it and put it into the game? Or is it something a bit more sinister? Even in the latest story, which takes place on the planet Amphorius, the tale of the god Zagreus is coated with hints of the tale of the Lightbringer, also known as Lucifer, also known as Satan, also known in the Hebrew as Halel ben Shahar. So along with that, you also have Phynon, which could be coded or seen as a Christ-like figure, or maybe an even better comparison would be an Antichrist-like figure. The notion of time repeating itself and multiple copies of people being born harkens to the idea of reincarnation. The notion of Finon being another version of Kevin Kaslana, who was from Honkai Impact 3rd, and hinting at the idea of parallel universes. Unfortunately, that is a story that I will have to tackle in a future video, along with the planet of dreams known as Penacony. But there are so many real-world allegories in this game that it would add an extra hour to this already lengthy video. Oh, well, maybe I should just talk faster. I mean, I don't know. Anywho, as you can see, this game is chock full of occult and esoteric ideas that when you simply scratch beneath the surface, you can see what drives these people to create their art, whether it's conscious or not. When you open yourself up to dark spiritual forces and are not rooted in Christ, these evil beings will subtly guide your hand in order to push their agenda and introduce the audience to the world of darkness slowly but surely. Some people may think that it's just a game, there's nothing deeper than what you see, and that they're not being influenced. But even people who believe in the Messiah could potentially have a doorway open that they are not aware of. And that doorway could result in disembodied spirits, which, as the Bible tells us, they are constantly all around us. These spirits could end up whispering in your ear and influencing you and eventually leading you astray. So if you have a chink in your armor, they will find a way to slip through. As it states in the Bible, put on the full armor of the Lord. We are constantly at war with these dark spiritual forces and disembodied spirits who, as we know, were the Nephilim giants, which were a melding of human and angel. And so when the flood came and they died, there was no place for their soul to go. So now these souls of these Nephilim giants, these hybrid beings, are basically wandering the earth, looking for bodies to inhabit. Not only that, but there are powerful and dark spiritual forces that basically have dominion over certain geographical areas of our world. Or you can look at it as they control different parts of the world or even different cities or states. Like, for example, when you look at, certain states here in America or certain cities here in America, why does it seem like this town or this city or maybe even a country is just surrounded by death and destruction? It's because these spiritual forces have dominion over that area. So you have to make sure that you are properly protected with the right gear. Keep your weapons at the ready and stay locked and loaded. Don't let these little things pile up to the point where you end up falling away from the faith, because even if your name is currently written in the book of life, it can always be erased. But that will do it for this video. I will hopefully see you in the next one. But in the meantime and in between time, be sure to like and subscribe and do all that other YouTube jazz. This has been your boy, your Unc, Max Vapor. Peace.